Welcome back to the Equity Podcast. In today's episode, we're exploring a topic that sits at the heart of health equity, mutual aid, known as giving financial support to community members who need it. Historically minoritized communities, such as Black transgender individuals, often experience significant barriers due to both racism and transphobia regarding food access, stable housing, access to transportation, mental health support, and people who are willing to show up for us when we need them most. During my recent search online, I came across an amazing organization dedicated to help improving the lives of Black trans people through mutual aid. This organization, the Okra Project, is a national Black trans-led mutual aid organization dedicated to supporting Black transgender people through direct assistance, advocacy, and community-centered care. Their work demonstrates that improving health outcomes is not only about treating illness, it is also about ensuring people have the resources, dignity, and support they need to thrive. Joining me today is Gabrielle Inès Souza, Executive Director of the Okra Project. Gabrielle has helped lead the organization's growth while remaining deeply committed to its mission of meeting immediate needs and investing in long-term change. Throughout our conversation, we discuss what mutual aid really means, why meeting basic needs is foundational to health, the importance of developing future Black trans leaders, and how all of us can become more meaningful allies in creating healthier, more equitable communities. I'm so grateful you're here. Let's jump into the conversation. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Equity Podcast. Today, I'm going to focus on supporting mutual aid programs. We're going to talk about what that means, and we're going to talk about how mutual aid is important for our community, the LGBTQ plus community. Today, I am meeting with Gabrielle Inès Souza, who I will introduce now. Gabrielle Inès Souza is the Executive Director of the Okra Project, a national Black trans-led organization advancing food security and community care through mutual aid, advocacy, and systems change. Grounded in deep empathy and unflinching honesty, Gabrielle has built and led programs that respond to urgent material needs while challenging the structures that create them. Known for her ability to unite people around bold, values-driven visions, she leads with both heart and precision, ensuring that Black and brown trans and queer communities are not only heard, but supported to thrive. Welcome to the show, Gabrielle.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and be in conversation with you.
I am definitely excited to be in conversation with you. I am so glad that I came across not only who you are, but also the Okra Project, which I think is doing a fabulous job for the community. And I'm going to start with some background questions so people can become familiar with the organization and what you do. The Okra Project is a nonprofit collective focused on providing programming and opportunities funded through mutual aid to support the lives of Black trans people. Many people have heard the term mutual aid, but not everyone understands what makes it different from traditional charity or nonprofit work. How do you explain that difference?
I explained that difference. Well, first, I think what's important too is to set the stage of where the Okra Project started and where we are now. The Okra Project started in 2018 by Ann Field Stewart, who's a Black trans woman from New York. And it started, like I said, 2018, 2019, during COVID, during the George Floyd uprising, the social justice movement happening then. And they started out by hiring Black trans and queer chefs that were creating culturally specific meals to the Black community and providing them to the trans and queer members directly in New York. And they were also doing some light rental support and things at that time. I think what's also important to note in this conversation is that was right around the time you had other organizations like Black Trans Femmes in the Arts for the girls that started to pop up and were doing work in Brooklyn as well. And so those organizations collectively started receiving an abundance of funds because, of course, white guilt. And they started pouring money into those organizations. And so getting back at the heart of it, of mutual aid specifically, the organization came at a time when Black, trans, and queer people, specifically also just the Black community as a whole, we were seeing just how disenfranchised and marginalized we were. But when you think about the Black, trans, and queer community, as at the intersectionality of that, we receive, the fallout from all of that, as a whole. What happens to the Black community, we feel the most because we're also double marginalized because of our identities. And so mutual aid really is bucking back against the system. Like, yes, we have government assistance programs, but when you think about government assistance, there's so many loops and hoops and rings of fire that you have to jump through just to get a sliver of assistance, right? And so mutual aid is really taking resources and putting them directly in the hands of those that need them most. We're not asking a bunch of questions about, how are you going to use this? Why do you need this? If you rental support, I'm not asking you to provide me the housing notice that you're about to be evicted. It's treating you with dignity and care and respect and saying, okay, you're coming to me in your honest time of need. We have pulled these resources and now we're going to give them to you. And so that's the way that mutual aid operates.
Wow. I really think that's a fabulous explanation and opens my eyes to the difference, right? What we're hearing right now is mutual aid has an emphasis on the dignity portion of community and understanding that at baseline, we don't need more information than just knowing who you are to know that there is oppression affecting you and the people who may identify like just you. So I think that's my understanding of what you said. And you mentioned some really great points in there. When we talk about Black trans rights right now, I have a question for you. If you've thought of this, what do Black trans people in today's evolving landscape deserve regarding progress in the rights that we have been challenged in being able to obtain?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And I think it's a loaded question in the sense of that's something that I've also been thinking about just internally as a Black trans woman myself and doing this work, going through just so many phases of my life. I started my transition in 2018. It's honestly right when I came, to know that the Okra Project existed myself. But I've seen so many steps that we've taken forward as a community, so many great strides, so many opportunities and rights that we received, and then they're snatched back. And the reason, we have to be honest about the reason of why that's happening is because of this balance that, our government and the powers that be play, right? Democrats, Republicans, and all these things, right? So as soon as Republicans get a hold of the House, our rights and things are snatched from us. The community, though, I think if we could have it in a perfect world, I keep landing on that dignity piece, honoring our dignity, honoring our personhood, just trusting us that we know ourselves. One of the huge conversations right now with the trans and queer community, and again, we're talking about the Black trans and queer community because we've received the brunt of everything. For whatever reason, there's this lack of trust that we know who we are when we say it. If I tell you that I'm Black, if I tell you that I'm trans, these are things that I know. I know myself better than anyone else. And to have someone in a position of power, government specifically, that is supposed to care for the people, try to sweep in and try to tell me that, oh no, I think what you're saying about yourself is wrong, is insane to me. And so I think for us to move forward, dignity, we need to be trusted that we are the stewards of our own lives. We know what we need. We know what we want. I built the framework for the Okra Project also in listening and keeping my ear to the ground to community and listening to them tell me what it is that they need and what it is that they want. And then that guides me on what I do with the resources that we collect via funding and donors and things like that.
Yeah, like boots on the ground, ears close to the crowd. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to if you are putting yourself in a position to help a person, a community, the least that you could do, the best thing that you could do is listening to that person. That is the only way that you will receive forward movement in the aid that you seek to provide. to a group of people or to a person, in my honest opinion.
You make me think of, going off script just a little bit, how they've done newer surveys on acceptance, and that's a loaded term because why do we need to accept identities? Like, people just should be able to identify as they are. But regardless, they've done surveys recently that have shown in America the acceptance of same-sex relationships has increased
Mm.
by a huge margin. We're still seeing the slow progress in the acceptance of transgender people. And that doesn't even broach the topic of transgender people in relationship, for example, too. So we still have a long way to go. And I appreciate what you said about listening. That part of the conversation gets overridden, right, by so much media rhetoric and speech and belief. But when do we get the time to actually listen to our Black trans people in our communities and hear what they're experiencing, right? Because as you pointed out, through intersectionality, the population is double oppressed, right, by race and gender. And so I do think dignity is so important in this conversation. And I'm glad for you highlighting that, but also listening. I'm also thinking about times where there's been joy in the work that you've done, because I'm sure that you've been a part of many events and been able to hear stories from people about what they've gone through and maybe the help they've received in the Okra Project that has been quite monumental for them. So what brings you joy in the work that you do?
I'm a product of mutual aid. I cannot overstate that. I tell people that all the time. Like I said, I started my transition in 2018. For those for those that are listening, I'm not originally from New York. I grew up in East St. Louis, Missouri, or Illinois actually, but St. Louis, Missouri, between St. Louis and Houma, Louisiana, more specifically. If you know Houma, Louisiana, it is like back roads, dirt roads, country. Single mother home, father incarcerated for most of my life. I didn't have the language around my transness. So I personally say that I started my transition late. I know a lot of people don't like that kind of like terminology, but I started my transition at a time where I was in need of community. You know, one of the things that I felt like maybe speaking to, and we can probably get into this later after I answer this question, but that you touched on was like progress around same-sex relationships, right? But not necessarily for trans people. And at that time, you know, I was living as a very androgynous, or what they would consider today non-binary individual. But deep down inside, I knew I was a woman. And I was being surrounded, or I was surrounded at that time by gay men. And I think what's surprising and shocks people when I say this is like, not only did I not have the support and backing of my family around my transness and who I wanted to be, but even gay men didn't really understand my transness either. And so I didn't really have the acceptance of them. They thought it was cute. They thought it was cool. They wanted to be around. They wanted to hang out, right? But I didn't have support there either. And so it just kind of like bubbled over for me to where I was just like, I'm going to jump. I'm just going to do it. And my life started to change slowly but surely. My circle of friends started to change as well. And that was one of the first points that I started to feel mutual aid be a reflection in my own life. Because then I remember 2019, that was the first gender affirming surgery that I had, which was breast augmentation. And I remember I saved up a little money for it because I was working. And I remember my best friend drove me down to Atlanta. We went to Atlanta to get it done. We went to a good surgeon down there. And I remember a friend of mine, you know, I was reaching out to family, extended family. I was reaching out to friends and crowdfunding, like kind of like privately. And I remember this friend just telling me, they were like, why don't you make a post online about it? Like, this is a need of yours. You're a Black trans woman. You've been using your voice for Black trans women. That's also kind of like when my activism, my time in activism started around that time as well, 2019. And they're like, you're a Black trans woman. Ask for what you need from community. And I When I tell you, we were on the way down, driving on the highway from St. Louis to Atlanta. I made a post quickly, and within hours, I had raised like over $2,000
Wow.
for this surgery to take me through the threshold of what I needed, what I had left to pay. And I was just like taken aback by that level of support that just surrounded me. And that was like my first touch of like mutual aid and like reaping those benefits. And so to answer your question that more directly, it's just like I know how I felt in that moment, being supported when I needed it. And when I let my guards down and was honest with myself about my needs and was just honest with others about my needs and how people showed up for me and how safe that made me feel, how supported that made me feel. And so my moments of joy is when we're providing aid through our programs here at the Okra Project. And we do like feedback surveys after people receive aid from us. And, one of the things that we ask of our constituents and our community members is, how did this help you? How did this make you feel? And we get so many stories about what they were able to do and accomplish and achieve with these resources. We've heard stories of people saying, yes, I received the rental stipend to help me with my rent, which then allowed me to purchase some books that I needed for university or purchase a ticket back home to see an ailing family member. So things like that really provide me joy. Being out in community often too, where people look at me with a level of admiration and just like, I know she's got us. I know that she's doing the work on behalf of the community to fill in the gaps that we're feeling from the government and the system and things like that. And so those are my big, big moments of joy. We just did a story with one of our trans mass siblings about their journey with mental health support that we provide here at the Okra Project. We provide 3 to 6 months of free mental health support to our constituents through BetterHelp. And we just did like a recent online storytelling thing. And this person was really just opening up about their journey with mental health and their manhood and how this support has really helped nurture and be the man that they are today. And so, yeah, those are just like little moments of joy that I really, really hold on to and that let me know that this work is worth doing. And I wake up to do it every day.
Yes. Wow, that was really touching. That was really heartwarming. Yeah, I totally understand that part on lived experience, how that can infer your work and the reason why you do it. And as a person, like you said, who's received mutual aid, how important that has been for you. And I appreciate you highlighting that. You never know how much help exists. I have a similar story too, like even for this podcast, like receiving support when I first started having a Kickstarter. I'm still raising funds, but initially having the Kickstarter, many people that I didn't even realize were able to support me, right? You never know unless you ask. And as people doing work for the community, especially you, I loved how you said the whole portion of people know that you got them, right? Like you are working on behalf of them. We ask that of our elected officials, right? We ask that about so many people, and we hope that they are. And to know that you actually are is amazing. So, yes, yes. Thank you so much for detailing that. I see you've progressed in your time on the Okra Project. I'll be honest, I was looking at your LinkedIn. So I saw that you had been a program manager, if I'm correct, then went to program director, deputy director, and now executive director. So, what have you appreciated about this stepwise approach to increasing leadership in your organization?
I would be remiss if I did not speak to the difficulties of running an organization like this. And just, I think, community led projects in general. I feel as though this organization has been through a lot. I don't know how long you've been following the work of the Okra Project, but we've been through a lot. I'll be honest with people too listening is like, I never imagined or dreamed that I would be an executive director of a nonprofit. It was not something that I was seeking or that I really wanted, but it fell into my lap. It fell into my lap due to some unfortunate and unforeseen circumstances that happened. But yeah, I came on 2021 as a program manager. Like I said, I was doing some activism and some work throughout the Midwest and the South, and they tapped me on my shoulder and brought me in, moved to New York. And I was just like the kid in the candy store. I was like, I'm happy to be here, you know. I didn't have a lot of community in the Midwest and in the South. And so being in New York allowed me the opportunity to get in contact with even more trained and queer people, you know, that looked like me, that felt like me, had similar stories. And I think that that really, really shapes who we are as trans and queer people. Having that access, having those relationships, and slowly over the course, you know, things tipped and changed. And by way of circumstance, and also what I had begun to learn in certain positions here at the organization, and also, you know, me spending 9 years in healthcare administration and management before all of this, I started to bring those things into the organization as well. And I just slowly started to move my way up as far as responsibility here at the organization. And I think, you know, our last executive director that we had, Alana, the organization just had so much that had happened that we had created a board of directors that was just like very much so like no nonsense, nothing. Any slip, you were out, right? And so that happened. And I was a deputy director at that time. And then the executive director role kind of just fell into my lap. But I will say, even in it falling in my lap, I did my due diligence to really learn the needs and the requirements of this role so I could be the best that I could be at it. I knew that there was a lot at stake with this organization. I knew that I would have to be much different than those that came before me. I knew that I would have to create a level of transparency for this organization that did not exist before. And so that's why in 2023, I moved us to receive our 501c3 status for full financial transparency and also open us up to the possibility of more funding.
So, and can you explain a little bit about that? Like with financial transparency, meaning in a mutual aid program, that all the money that you're giving, they know exactly where it's going to. Is that kind of what it means?
From a basic standpoint, you're right on path with and right on right on the money with it. Because when you think about it, I know some people have conflicting ideas about 501c3 status because again, you know, you are now technically a government entity. And so people are like, well, how are you really operating as a mutual aid effort with 501c3 status? And it's like, well, no, that doesn't take the grassroots level out of it. That just means I have to report what I'm doing with the funds that we receive to Uncle Sam. Regardless if we have 501c status or not, Uncle Sam always wants to know where money is going. So even if we don't have 501c3 status, I may still have to provide 1099 to recipients of aid, right? It's still tracked. I did this because there'd been a lot of financial mismanagement with the organization, prior to my leadership or me coming into the leadership role. And in being completely transparent and honest, white people fund a lot of our work, if not all of it, if I'm going to be honest. And if I know anything about white people, they want to know where their money is going. you know, and at this period, you know, it's this point blank period. And so, yes, 501c3 status definitely offers transparency. You can go online and you can see specifically how much we have spent on programming. You can go online and see how much executives and staff are getting paid. You can see all of those things. And I wanted to do that too, to protect myself, because I've seen other Black trans femmes that lead work like this get dragged for everything under the sun. Misappropriation of funds, all these things. And so I did not want to be a victim of that, but I'm also a very honest and transparent person in general in my life. And so it was important for me to do that. But I will say the key point of that was the funding part, because you do get more money if you have 501c3 status. And I looked at that as a means to provide more resources to my community. So an expansion from that.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you also going through the story of how you got to your position. Of course, unfortunately, we know the organization has been through different changes in leadership and there has been some controversy there, but I want to definitely focus on where you've led the organization now and not skip over what you said, but emphasize how now there is a change in the transparency. And also, that means that there is more funding available for those who need it. I think that's wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Of course. Given this podcast focus on health equity and the factors contributing to it, it's important for me to highlight that the Okra Project has supported everything from therapy access in mental health to rental assistance, food, transportation assistance, and emergency relief. Many of these fund opportunities are directly tied to important social drivers of health, such as housing security, food access, and relationship building. You mentioned a program or two earlier. I think you mentioned For the Girls. I've been on the website. I saw that there was a Black Mental Health Therapy Fund. I'm curious, of the funds that are available, which of these have you seen most utilized?
One of the most utilized, I think, is rental support, our rental program that we do. And I would second our Black Trans Joy Fund. It's something that was started by a program director, Max Regano, 2024. And so that program didn't have like a specific need to it. It was, here's a stipend of money. You can do whatever it is that you need with it. So there's an added layer of that dignity piece that I speak about that we really operate here on at the Okra Project. And so it's like, if you wanted to take yourself out for a nice dinner, do that. If you are one of the girls and you want to go get your hair done, do that. If you want to go buy yourself a nice outfit to go to, I don't know, the Tea for Tea party on Friday, go do that, you know? And so that's why we called it the Black Trans Joy Fund, because it's literally just pouring into whatever brings you joy as a community member. Take this stipend, do whatever you need with it. Use it in whichever way you see fit. And so those are the two that we receive the most applicants, so to speak, on rental and the Black Trans Joy Fund.
That's so cool. Again, offering more opportunities without as many limits, because I can only think of organizations like even in our own government that require like full-length applications and you have to go through numerous questions. And it sounds like removing that piece allows for easier access. I think that's wonderful. And has anything surprised you over the years that you've seen people ask for? I know that we're living in challenging times, especially for mental health. So maybe that's something that you've seen an increased need for, or has it kind of stayed rental assistance, for example, and the Joy Fund have been stable?
Those have been like the staple for sure. You know, I do my best to highlight our partnership with BetterHelp because I think mental health is a key component of health, equity, joy, especially for our community. The problem with that, though, is, and that what I have realized is there's still a lot of stigma around mental health and seeing a therapist and things like that. There's a lot of fear around opening up to someone that you don't really know. There's a lot of fear around cracking yourself open and also facing yourself and your issues and your problems and maybe the reasons that those things are happening, right? And so we've had steady applications come in for our therapy program, but not as much as we see with others, which is, again, direct resourcing. So that's like funds. And I think a big part of that is like, when you think about poverty or impoverished communities, you have to think about like how much time alone that steals from you, right? If you're impoverished, You are usually probably taking public transportation to get from A to B. So you're waiting on buses, you're waiting on trains, doing all those things. You are calling assistance hotlines. You are comparing the pricing of groceries. You are fighting with your insurance and Medicaid for gender affirming care. So being impoverished and being poor is a full-time job that you don't get paid for. So when you think about mental health, you probably also don't have the time or the capacity to even think about sitting down and meeting with somebody and talking about your issues. And so that's like the bigger structure of it that I want us to get to. Mutual aid at its core is a Band-Aid. It's not a system. I think that people think it's a system, but it's a Band-Aid. If I'm going to be honest, it's a Band-Aid. And it's to fill in a gap, right? But I say all that to say that, yeah, a lot of people can't focus on health if they don't have their basic needs met. And so that's what I'm trying to do here at the Okra Project. I'm like, I want to help you with your rent. I want to help you with utilities. I want to help you with groceries. So you don't really have to alleviate some of that barrier for you. And then maybe you can spin the block and then you can come and apply for 3 to 6 months of free therapy because it's free. It's there. It's for you. When you're ready for it, you have to be ready for it and you have to be in a position to receive it. And a lot of that is due to what we don't have and what we're not receiving, unfortunately and sadly.
That I think I even am going to listen back to this and say, wow, like there was really a message here, because I think what I'm hearing from you is how when we're in situations confronted by the realities of either being unhoused or experiencing stigma, etc., and like how those factors compounded on each other interact, how you don't really have time to schedule an appointment, or you don't really feel supported in expressing how your mental health is doing. And mental health has a huge emphasis in our community. Many individuals may be experiencing stress related to internal and external factors related to their identity. It is important to note, too, that continuous therapy, which, as you've mentioned, the connection with BetterHelp, allows for that at least to start for the 3 to 6 months that you said. Also, in addition to continuous therapy, gender-affirming treatments, supportive work family environments, they have all been correlated with gender euphoria or being proud of one's identity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I appreciate that while you've mentioned that the organization is making strides in being proactive addressing mental health needs of Black trans folks, that mutual aid, again, does not fix the system of oppression that we're in, does not fix the systemic overtaking by government of defining who we are, for example, erasing our identities. I think we have to think bigger level change when it comes to decreasing the stigma that affects us, because it comes from all fronts. And by at least starting within our community and trying to provide that support, we'll be able to make some strides, but not fix the entire issue. So it's awesome that that's going on and that is still being offered. So I do hope that more people can take advantage of it. I do wonder, are these funds, I didn't ask you this before, are they only available to people in New York City, or are they available outside of that?
Yeah, no, we operate on a national scale. So people outside of New York City can apply as well. There are times where we will do a program in which it's the first portion of it, the half, is only open to New York residents. And then we'll open it on a national level. But yes, we do operate on a national level to where we serve the community nationally. We had a motto at one point where it's like, yeah, we serve Black and brown, trans, and queer people wherever we can reach them.
Yeah, I love that motto, right? Because we exist everywhere. I mean, we exist all over the world. But I mean, exactly, providing as much care in as many places as possible, I think is incredible. I value the peer-to-peer emphasis within the Okra Project, as it emphasizes the value of people within communities joining together to come together and support each other directly. It reminds me of times when I volunteered in nonprofit organizations and have seen people from that very community where they grew up being served also now be part of the leadership in the organization. As you've already stated, how you grew up in St. Louis and then moved to New York, and not necessarily having like ties from, it sounds like, family in New York originally, but finding your community when you were there and being able to explore your identity even further. I think that that highlights how you have that lived experience and then now you are in a leadership position. I think that transition is so beautiful. I'm curious, what opportunities do you see in the future for professional development of our Black trans youth who may be underrepresented in the space you're in? If you've thought about long term, who's next to lead, or how can we train and empower the upcoming generation to be leaders in their own community?
Yeah, I think that that is something that I've just began to think about as I get older. And I'm kind of like, I've been doing this now for 5 years. Typically and historically, most executive directors, stay in their position for an allotted amount of time before they move on, either to another organization or they just move on to doing something else. I think that I have an unhealthy attachment to this organization. It is like my baby, because I've seen it through so many phases. And so I say that to say that, I don't really see myself like leaving anytime soon, but I've been thinking about development in the sense of, I just had a meeting actually last week with a organization, a group of lovely young women who offer developmental aid and programming through their nonprofit they have. And they reached out, I think historically they were doing it for cis women. And then they wanted to incorporate, and I don't know, like, I don't want to like speak for them or just speak to it. I'm just saying what I gathered was, I guess, since they're cis led, I'm assuming that maybe trans femmes did not feel maybe comfortable or feel like it was for them. I also don't feel that they had like very expansive language to kind of like signal that. But they reached out, and there's the possibility of us talking about doing a partnership where we do some programming around management, owning your own business, financial management. If you want to do hair, things like that, just a bunch of different things, right? But I want to stick to like what we talked about of like business management, financial management, things like that that can be applied in everyday life, but also can be applied if you want to become a leader of a nonprofit, if you want to start your own nonprofit, and so sometimes people do ask, like, oh, well, where do you see the Okra Project, 2 to 5 years from now?
I was gonna ask that. You got me.
2023 is when like the mutual aid programs really expanded, right? And so now I think I've gotten that down pat. I'm like, okay, we got this. Now I want to start getting into the development piece. Like, how do I help develop the future leaders that can lead the charge and lead this work and lead these organizations and have the template and the blueprint in order to do it? And so, yeah, I think within the next 2 to 5 years, I think that's what I'm hoping to build out. Building out programs is not easy. I want people to know that it's not simple. It's not easy at all. I think from the outside looking in, it does look like it is, but I think especially with something when we're thinking about career development and development of future leaders, it takes a lot of work, and I'm ready to do that work. And so that's where I see us in the next 2 to 5 years, expanding our programming in that way to where we're pouring back into the future leaders.
Amazing. Amazing. I think this partnership you have going on regarding improving business acumen, like that knowledge of like business and running that, and then also financial management, is so awesome. All of this, in my opinion, ties into health equity, because if you are able to manage your finances, you're able to understand more about what it costs to have health insurance, for example, like taking out disability when you're on your job and like investing in yourself. So in the future, when you are sick, you have money stored away. These are things that we don't really get to talk about as much. And maybe even makes me think of like a future episode on this, because we don't really get to talk about what that looks like aging and being financially responsible so when we get older, we can take care of ourselves and thinking about that too.
I just think it's so important, when we're talking about, or like when I mentioned earlier over the lack of resources and like people who live in poverty, like you don't really have space to think about these things, right? So you're not learning these things. But maybe if it's at your disposal and you have it, that helps set you up, like you were speaking to, it helps set you up for success in the long run, right? And I think in community, we don't think about that. We don't talk about that because we're always running on survival mode. So what does it look like for us to get out of survival mode and thrive? That's what I want for my community. I don't want them in survival. I want my community to thrive. And that's why I'm trying to help them to get. So I think that's that key element too. Like, how do we get our community to the point of thriving and not just surviving? And that's, like you said, that business education, financial management, all of those things, banking, we possibly have an opportunity to work with Chase to where they want to come in and they want to do some courses, again, around financial management and banking and things like that. And also maybe do some opportunities for hiring, So
Yeah.
we're trying to expand. I'm trying to go above and beyond.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to see this. Wow. There's a lot going on and there's a lot of joy in the process and I can only imagine what's to come. So I appreciate you highlighting these future partnerships that might come for the organization. And this makes me, yeah, so excited. In terms of getting close to the ending of our conversation, again, this has been a fabulous conversation. Really, really excited to share this with people. I'm curious, what message do you have for allies of the community, people who wish to give meaningful support to Black trans people? And this kind of ties into you letting us know how best to support the success of the Okra Project. And I'll make sure to share details about the website and donation stuff in the links too.
Thank you so very much. I think if I was to leave a message for allies and supporters, I want to loop back to that listening piece. I think that is just so important when we think about allyship and support, is listening to our experiences, listening to us tell our stories, listening to us tell you what it is that we need to, again, get out of survival mode and to thrive. We know ourselves best. I think also allyship looks like investing in organizations like the Okra Project that are doing the necessary work that our governments are not doing and providing for us. Supporting GoFundMes. One of the things that I hate to see, the difference in how Black and brown, trans, and queer people's GoFundMes are supported as opposed to our white counterparts. I want to be honest about that if I can. Our white counterparts, can post a GoFundMe for, I don't know, some gender affirming surgery, and they raise well above it in a day. And I'm seeing GoFundMes of siblings, Black and brown, trans, and queer siblings who have been raising funds for weeks to months and still haven't met their goal. And that hurts me. And for allies, I think there's still just this undercutting of internal racism, I think, not trusting Black
Yeah,
people.
yeah, racism.
Yeah,
Yeah,
racism. I love the fact you stepped back. You said,
that's what that is. No, it
that's what
is.
that
It's
is,
so
right?
true.
And it's not trusting that Black people, that we're going to do what we say we're going to do with the funds, which honestly should not matter at baseline to me. If I'm asking for something, just trust that process. That's what I'm going to do with it. If I'm asking for it, then I probably do need it. You're not asking our white counterparts, oh, what are you going to do with this money? What did you do with it? You're not asking that. You're just spelling it out to them. We see it in the same way that organizations like ours are funded. We see a lot of millionaires and billionaires funding larger white-led organizations, but we don't get half of the donations and the funding that they receive. So I think to allies too is like really step up and show up for the Black and Brown trans community and their needs, be that GoFundMe's, be that organizations like the Okra Project, having conversations with your circle of friends, colleagues. If you have, these days, a lot of corporations have like internal like giving programs that they do where they internally raise funds for various organizations. So having more conversations about the disparities of the Black and Brown trans community and how we receive the most, even under the umbrella of LGBTQA plus rights and resources and things like that, we receive the last bit of it. Everyone comes to us and they're like, well, this is what we have left. Here you go. And it's like, why aren't we receiving the first portion? Why are we receiving leftovers? So in a nutshell, I would love to see allies listen to us, support us, uplift our voices, uplift our stories, uplift the work that we're doing. We have so many talented Black and Brown, trans, and queer people that are artists, singers, performers, podcasters, storytellers. We deserve to be heard. We need to be uplifted full stop. We need to be uplifted in a myriad of ways. That's my message.
I appreciate this message. I keep saying I appreciate it, but I really do. Like, this is incredible. I feel uplifted. I feel inspired. I hope you do listening in. That's incredible. And again, I will list more specifically in the outro how to donate to the Okra Project because I know you do accept donations. But also in general, when we're talking about allyship, we're talking about, yes, listening. We're talking about respect. We're talking about offering funding if you can and able. I was raised in the idea that if you can, you should. And I do believe that. I believe that for our Black trans community, that we do deserve that. And I do want to see more of the aid that is being dispersed to the transgender community, being dispersed to the people in the community that most need it. And I would say Black trans folks definitely do most need that money. So I think that that's incredible. And I really appreciate you highlighting that. Anything else that you wanted to add to the conversation?
No, I think we covered so much things. You had some great questions. I want to say thank you. Sometimes I come into these and I'm like, oh, they're going to ask, but this is a great conversation. Again, I am so honored. I'm so grateful that you reached out. Again, honored and grateful to be in conversation with you and to meet you. And so, yeah, this is great. Support Black trans people.
Yes, I'm so honored that you were able to come on. This has been a joy. And at this time, I appreciate you all listening in and stay tuned for the outro. One of the biggest takeaways from my conversation with Gabrielle is that mutual aid rests in the idea that giving support to a population does not necessarily mean requiring proof that one deserves it. When we acknowledge the historical wrongdoings between Black and trans people in this country, we can see that health inequities makes one's ability to live a long, healthy life that much shorter compared to white and trans identifying people. In this segment, we have explored the amazing efforts that exist to help uplift individuals who need it most, regardless of any physical, quote, proof they may need to show it. This is what separates mutual aid from our direct government assistance programs. In my opinion, both are needed. The Okra Project reminds us that caring for one another is not an abstract idea. It's an intentional practice rooted in dignity, trust, and collective responsibility. I especially appreciated Gabrielle's perspective that mutual aid is about more than providing resources in moments of crisis. It's about investing in people, recognizing their inherent worth, and building systems where Black transgender people have the opportunity not only to survive, but to experience joy, stability, and the freedom to thrive. As allies and community members, there is much we can learn from this model of community-centered care. I want to extend my sincere gratitude to Gabrielle for sharing her time, wisdom, and leadership with us today, and for the incredible work she and the Okra Project continue to do in advancing health equity for Black transgender communities across the country. If you'd like to learn more about the Okra Project, support their mission, or contribute to their mutual aid efforts, please visit theokraproject.com. Every contribution helps expand access to the resources and care that so many community members rely on. And if you want to hear more content, watch clips of our conversation, or keep up with the show, let's push the conversation more on Instagram at Equality Podcast or on TikTok at BEQ Pod. Full video podcast episodes are posted on YouTube, which is also linked in bio. Or you can type the Equality Podcast in the search bar. If you had liked what you heard today, please give the show a quick star rating, follow and or subscribe on your preferred listening platform. Take care and see you in the next episode.